We'll begin with that breaking news tonight. Wikileaks founder Julian Assange has been arrested, dragged out of London's Ecuadorian embassy after 7 years. Let's bring in European correspondent Laurel Irving now, live outside the Westminster Magistrates Court. Laurel, good evening. What has happened?
Good evening, Michael. Well, the Ecuadorian embassy in Ecuador has withdrawn its asylum for Julian Assange, essentially leaving him no legal protection. And so early this morning, British time, about 6.5 hours ago, British police arrived at the Ecuador embassy and arrested Julian Assange. They dragged him into a van. Heavily bearded Julian Assange. We haven't seen him in public for nearly 2 years now. He was yelling, almost appeared to be resisting this arrest. He's been in custody ever since, and just in the last hour or so has been brought here to the Westminster Magistrates Court. We do expect him to face court in the next hour or so. Now, this will be a relatively complicated hearing. He is wanted here in Britain for essentially skipping bail 7 years ago when he was wanted by Swedish authority on sexual assault charges. Instead, he fled to the Ecuador embassy. So he was arrested on that initially, but now we find out the US has separately and secretly also issued an arrest warrant for Julian Assange in 2017. Now, this is arising from 2010 when he's alleged to have conspired with US military whistleblower Chelsea Manning, and so the US will apply to extradite him to the US as well, and of course Swedish authorities will now have to consider their position as well, whether or not they reopen that investigation into those original sexual assault charges. So it's obviously very early days, Michael. We'll know hopefully a bit more in the next couple of hours about what happens from here.
Indeed, that is moving very quickly though. Laurel, the President of Ecuador has made a statement explaining the decision to revoke the asylum of Julian Assange. Let's just have a quick listen to part of that statement.
The patience of Ecuador has reached its limit on the behaviour of Mr. Assange. He installed electronic equipment and distortion equipment not allowed. He blocked the security cameras of Ecuadorian mission in London. He has confronted and mistreated guards.
All right, so that's the reason for kicking him out after 7 years there, Laurel. Why now, though? Why has this happened after all those years?
Well, what it essentially boils down to is that the new president of Ecuador simply is not sympathetic at all to Julian Assange's cause. The previous president of Ecuador, who granted him asylum in the first place, has now been replaced, and this new president has never liked having Julian Assange in his embassy in London, and has gradually over the past year or so made it more and more hard for Julian Assange. We know last year he cut off his internet access. He's effectively cut him off from the outside world. His lawyers had said that the mental health of Julian Assange was deteriorating as a result. Ecuador had told Julian Assange to improve his personal hygiene, to look after his cat better, just trying to put more and more pressure on. But now it's emerged that they have very much been in tight discussions with UK authorities. In fact, the UK Home Secretary has said that he will rightly now face justice. Another minister here said that Julian Assange is no hero. So this has been building up for a while. Ecuador felt now that it could take action. The Australian Foreign Minister has now issued a statement saying that Julian Assange will receive the usual consular help, and that consulate officials here in the UK will visit him at his place of detention when it's appropriate to do so.
All right, look, we've got a lot of news to get through to here tonight, Laurel, but just to underscore something, part of those charges that are developing in the last hour or so relate to extradition to the US. Now, under the Trump administration, he's considered an enemy of the state there at the moment. They are serious charges. That's a very serious fate that Mr. Assange is facing tonight.
That's exactly what he has always been worried about, not so much the skipping bail charges, but what would happen if he was extradited to the US. And we're just not sure how long that extradition hearing is likely to take. We know that Ecuador did ask for an assurance that he would not be sent somewhere with the death penalty. Remains to be seen what happens, Michael.
Indeed. All right, that's going to keep on changing. Laurel Irving in London, thank you so much for that breaking news.